Victor, thank you so much for coming on with us today. It is a pleasure, a privilege, and an honor to have one like you to come on our podcast. I had the privilege of connecting with you at the Border 911 event at Mar-a-Lago, and I just have to say you are an upstanding man of courage and integrity, and I'm very thankful to have you on our podcast today. So
Well,
I'd like to first, go ahead.
no, I was going to say thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to our discussion today.
Well, you are very welcome. I'd like to start with your story. Tell us your story, your background, and go ahead and get into the ambush that happened. I know you talk about it in your book. We'll get to that as well, but I want to hear your story.
Yeah, I'm a retired special agent with Homeland Security Investigations. I was born and raised in El Paso, Texas, on the border. Worked most of my career along the border. I've worked at every level of government, at the county level, state level, federal level, and international level abroad, working in Mexico and in Europe, and as a diplomat. And so I understand borders. I understand border security. I'm a subject matter expert in human trafficking investigations and victim identification. I rescued a lot of children and victims of human trafficking in my career back when nobody knew what human trafficking was. Of course, the drug trafficking trade and arms trafficking, anything that touches our border or has a nexus to the border, HSI has a jurisdiction to investigate that commercial fraud, any kind of counterfeits coming through that border. So you can imagine the vast authority that HSI agents have. And so my career led me to, at one point in 2008, to go work on the other side of the border. It started off on the other side of El Paso, Texas, in Ciudad Juarez at the U.S. consulate there. And it was when that city was the most dangerous city in the world. They were, experiencing 350 homicides a month. And so my temporary duty then transferred over to Mexico City as a permanent assignment, where my family and I went over there and moved to Mexico City. I was assigned to the U.S. Embassy, and my world changed because it was a very different level of not only with the investigations that I was doing, because now I was able to expand these investigations and help out all the stateside offices with the collateral duties and, looking for fugitives. Yes, drug trafficking cases, human trafficking. I was in charge of the Global Trafficking in Persons Initiative in Mexico. So there was a lot. I just put it to you this way. It was a overwhelming amount of work. The ICE office, or HSI, you'll hear me call it ICE or HSI, same thing. It's was the busiest office at that time, Mexico City, and so it kept me at work most of the time. As a matter of fact, then the balance between life and work and my personal life really became affected because even though my wife was very understanding of my career all these years, it got to a point where it was becoming troublesome at home because I spent most of my time at work. Sometimes I only came home 2-3 times a month
Wow.
because of all the travel and all the investigations. But having set that up for you, how busy it was in February of 2011, actually on Valentine's Day, on February 14th, I got the assignment to go pick up some equipment from our counterparts in Monterey. An assignment that I challenged very much so, because we understood back then that the Zetas cartel controlled that corridor of the highway that we use, which is the main corridor between Mexico City and Texas. And my bosses ignored that, and the order came to go anyway. And so they assigned Agent Jaime Zapata, who was from out of the Laredo office, who was in Mexico City on a temporary status. Nevertheless, we head out the next day on February 15th. We make contact with our counterparts. We pick up the equipment, and on our way back, we had some lunch. Jaime, then we switched. I was driving the whole time. At this point, Agent Zapata was driving, and within 20 minutes of him driving on Highway 57, we were ambushed and forced off the road by two SUVs full of Zeta cartel members. Now, we didn't know that there were Zeta cartel members at that time. So we were forced off the road and at gunpoint with AK-47s, long guns, and handguns as well. And they basically was an ambush. They forced us off the road. There was a lot of chaos, and unfortunately, they opened fire. Eventually, then striking Agent Zapata multiple times, taking his life. I got hit and shot 3 times, once in my chest and twice in my left leg. And so I'm here by the grace of God to be even to tell you this story. And so it was a very violent and very overwhelming experience that first, because it happened in another country. Second, this hadn't happened in Mexico since DEA agent Enrique Camarena was captured and murdered in 1985. And so this was a kind of a big shift from the cartels of what they were to what they are now. And there was a huge indicator that the cartels fear no one. They don't fear the Mexican authorities. They definitely don't fear the U.S. authorities anymore. And that day they proved it by taking the life of a U.S. Federal agent on the line of duty. And so, as you can imagine, that turned the life of my life and that of my family upside down. Got taken out of Mexico. Eventually went to Mexico to Washington D.C. for my physical recovery. But then I went back to work, and the true nightmare then begins, because I get a lot of questions that what was worse, the shooting or the aftermath. Well, it was definitely the aftermath, and I say it as bad as the shooting was. The aftermath lasted for so many years, and it was all doing because of my agency. Now, the administration back then, the Obama Biden administration, were, I believe they were complicit in this. They were the ones that facilitated Operation Fast and Furious. Mm-hmm. By the way, 2 of the weapons used against us were part of that Operation Fast and Furious. And so many other things that had happened in between. And so for some reason, they were retaliating against me, and they were giving me the short end of the stick. And my family and I were really, I use the word failed and betrayed a lot by my agency, because I just wanted to be taken care of and be put in a place where I could continue to work and continue my public service. But that was not the case.
Okay, you answered one of my questions already. I was going to ask, was this a planned ambush? Was the Mexican government complicit? Was the U.S. government complicit? And what I'm hearing is that both were complicit, and yes, it was planned. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I could tell you that it wasn't like, well, we're going to go kill Victor and Jaime, but the cartel definitely knew that we were on this highway, and somebody obviously tipped them off that we were on there, and they knew that we were Americans. I yelled and told them many times over that we were Americans, that we were U.S. Embassy employees, that we were U.S. diplomats. And as a matter of fact, when we testified in the criminal court in Washington, D.C., by the way, these shooters were arrested and extradited to the U.S. And we did have a big trial in 2017, and I couldn't believe my ears when they actually testified that said that, in fact, they did hear me, that they knew that we were Americans. And as a matter of fact, one of them testified that they even thought that I was a U.S. ambassador. So that was how clear they had that they knew that we were Americans, and they still decided to open fire.
Wow. So from the time that they opened fire, Jaime has, he's deceased. He's died literally on the spot right there. About how long did it take for you to get to medical care, and how did they get you there? Did they send, like helicopter to take you to a hospital?
Yeah, it was a long time. It was about 40-minute wait, which in the law enforcement world, and for a rescue to come, it's an extremely amount a long, long time. And so Jaime and I waited there until, yes, a helicopter was sent from Mexico City after I placed a phone call. So the only person that I trusted in Mexico City, the head of our vetted unit, the commander, I called him from my phone, and he was able to dispatch a trusted, Mexico, you can't call. This is a very big difference between the United States and many other countries, that we pick up the phone in the U.S. when we have an emergency and dial 911. In a matter of 2 to 3 minutes, we'll have someone at our door, whether it's a fire department or police, rescuing us or helping us with whatever issue we have. In Mexico, it doesn't work that way. In Mexico, not only you don't have that system, second of all, you have to call certain people, not just anybody, because of the levels of corruption. And so that's what we had to navigate through, even when I was making the call for help. Some of these details, a lot of these details are in there. When you read the book, you'll be surprised how raw and how personal the book is, because that's the way it had to be. I wanted people to get the sense of my life, who I was, and what U.S. agents are doing in foreign countries trying to protect our homeland.
It sounds compelling and amazing. And I really would encourage our listeners to get the book, because it's a real life story. And here's our real life hero. So,
well, thank you for that. You'll definitely go through some emotions reading that book, and it's an easy read. You believe me, you'll if you're a reader, you'll read in a couple of sittings. You'll go through it pretty quick.
human trafficking, that was something that I had wanted to talk about. You've already put that out on the table. Does that to you equate to modern day slavery now?
That's exactly what it is. Human trafficking is exactly what it is. This is slavery, but it's not what slavery the way people imagine it. Sometimes people think that the victims are bound and gagged or chained up to a room. That's not the type of slavery that this is. This is slavery by force, fraud, or coercion. And these victims have been broken physically, have been broken emotionally and mentally, and are under complete control of the trafficker. And when I talk about there's the two major types: is the sexual exploitation, and of course the forced labor. Well, the sexual exploitation side, they have these young victims working in brothels or as prostitutes, and on the forced labor, they have young children up to teenagers working in very, very horrific employment conditions, either in the agricultural field, in the food factories, in the textile industry, for little or no pay. And as a lot of people don't want to believe that actually exists here in the United States and a lot of countries around the world, but it certainly does. And the one thing that I learned and saw are some of the most horrific things that a human being is capable to do to another, especially a child. A lot of times people don't want to believe that is real, but it is real. It is evil. And I put an example in my book, a human trafficking case that I worked. And I did it on purpose. I did it because I want those people that say, "Oh no, you're crazy, Victor. That there's no child trafficking," and people just make that. I wish that was true, and I wish I would erase those images from my head and my mind of everything that I've seen. But I put that on there so people could know. And one thing is awareness. I talk a lot about awareness. If you know that this exists, by the way, human trafficking happens everywhere. It can happen next door to you, next to your house. I did a lot of cases in normal high-end neighborhoods where they had human trafficking victims right next door, and the people didn't know. And so it's a violation of law that we call that happens in plain sight. And so it's happening in front of you, and if you're not looking, you'll miss it and not really know that there's a possible victim right in front of you.
What I think a lot of people fail to comprehend is the fact of what you just said, that human trafficking, it's not just adults, it's children. It is helpless children that are some even babies, and the horrific things they do to them. It's like, how can such depravity exist? But it does, and you've seen it.
It's pure evil. Some things I'll never talk about ever here, there, not to my family, not to anyone. I'll take that to my grave because it's that horrific. But I'm just here to tell you that it exists, and the problem is that it exists a lot, and it's a big problem that we have in the U.S. Obviously, we could get into another conversation as to why that's a problem. I think it's God is missing in our lives, many other issues, many other big issues, the fatherless home, big social economic issues that I think happen, but one of the things that as a law enforcement officer, I see the enforcement of it. And I think that also in preventing some of these crimes is also a way to then be able to attack it from the other angle. The same thing with drug trafficking, right? Everybody tells me, well, we're the number one consumers of the drugs. We have a drug issue. Yes, we do. But I want to be able to stop the flow of the drugs, at least reduce them to where it has a significant impact to where our users don't have access to the drugs, so we can then focus on rehabilitating them.
Would you agree that America is the number one nation of child trafficking, just the whole child trafficking issue?
I believe so. Yeah, it really is. I mean, we have a problem here with pornography, child pornography exploitation. We are the number one consumers. We are the clients. That's why the victims are here. Now, it exists in a lot of parts around the world. It used to be just 15, 20 years ago that you would hear about Cambodia and Thailand and these places that you would think, well, that's really far away from me, so that doesn't really matter. Well, you know what? A lot of these traffickers realize I don't have to go to Cambodia. I could just have that here, and I could have it in Mexico next door and bring the victims from here. And so we also have a lot of sex tourism where U.S. Citizens travel abroad to engage in sexual activity with these children. I did these cases and arrested a lot of U.S. citizens in Mexico trying to involved in these activities.
One of the things I've heard other people in similar positions as yours say, and it makes total sense, when a drug trafficker sells drugs, he sells a commodity, he gets paid for it, and then he has to go get another supply of drugs. With human trafficking, he's got that person captive, and he doesn't have to go buy another person. He's got that person and can sell them over and over.
That's actually a great point. I say that a lot in my public speaking because if you think about it, it's a business for them.
Yes.
They treat a human being as the chair that I'm sitting on right now. It's a commodity. How many can they fit? How many can they put? How many can work for them? Now, if the chair breaks, well, you fix it. Well, the same thing with the human trafficking victim. Many, many victims are taken to the hospital. They're taken to clinics. They're taken to urgent cares because they get sick. They get venereal diseases. They get all these issues, right? I mean, they're seeing 30 to 40, 50 Johns a day. So 7 days a week, something's got to give. And so what they do is they'll take them and get them fixed so they could continue to exploit them as much as they can until they can dispose of them, until they no longer can function for them. And so that's exactly what they do. So it's one victim. And if you start doing the math, one victim at, let's say, $70, $75 per interaction at, let's say 40 times a night or 40 times a day. That's just one victim 7 times a week. You do the math, then say 50 victims, then say 100 victims. Then you start talking about real numbers of the money that these organizations are making and realize, wait a minute, the cartels realize that right away as well and say, wait a minute, well, these human beings pay a lot of money too. So then they also shifted and taking over that industry, the human trafficking and human smuggling as well.
Wow. Those are staggering numbers. I don't have words for that. I'm just going to say it. That's unbelievable. So, percentage-wise, of when you're on the border, when you were in the past on the border, would you venture a guess as to how many people in these groups that are coming through are people, families actually seeking a better life in America, as opposed to people, children, and adults that are being trafficked, sex trafficked, slave trafficked into this country. What would you guess is the percentage of the actual families seeking a better life versus the others?
That's a great question. And I'm going to answer it to you this way because it has shifted. That percentage has gone up. And I'm talking about the percentage of people not coming into the country for a better life. And so, and of course, I have to compare because the last 3.5 years of what we've gone through is an anomaly. This has never happened before. So you have to compare that because it kind of voids everything else that we have been doing for all my life, all my career. I dealt with a lot of what we call economic migrants, right? People that want to come into the U.S., they want to work. They're not going to commit additional crimes in the U.S. They just want to send money back to their country and help their families. Well, that category has shrunk tremendously. As a matter of fact, of course, they still exist. But now you have so many other categories of illegal aliens coming into the country that didn't exist before. Now I'll give you some. We have the criminal illegal alien that he's just a criminal. He's a criminal in his home country and he'll be a criminal here in the US. Then you have the one that wasn't a criminal in his home country, but will become one in the US because of opportunity. And because they face all these challenges when they get here, they won't have a job, they won't have an education, and so they then veer themselves into the criminal world to commit crimes to make it by. And then you have terrorism. Then you have that category of people literally just coming into the country for terroristic opportunities to plot against the U.S. And then you have so many other different categories. You have people coming into the country right now that have absolutely no need to come to the country. They were doing perfectly well in their country. They were business owners. I've talked to these people at the border. They sold their businesses. They sold their homes. They were doing well. They were middle-class individuals, but they saw the opportunity that this administration gave them, and they said, might as well do it now. If the opportunity was to go to the U.S. and be allowed in, so they sold everything, came here, and they brought their money. And now, as a matter of fact, a lot of those are finding themselves in more dire conditions than the ones that they were in their actual country. And so all of these different types of categories of people now exist, have been created by what this administration has done with the open border system.
I've also read that the cartels advertise to people exactly like those you have just described. And they run ads about, come to America. It's awesome and wonderful, and we will help you. And then it goes so sideways and wrong.
They absolutely advertise. They absolutely advertise on the radio, on the newspaper, online, social media. You'd be surprised on and Snapchat, TikTok. They have people advertising all the time, whether you want to come and turn yourself in or whether you want to be smuggled completely undetected and put in the back of a tractor trailer to your final destination. Either way, there's an opportunity. By the way, there's that other category that I didn't even mention, the gotaways. You've heard this term a lot. These are people that have evaded detection altogether, the unknown gotaways that we have no idea how they came in, where they came in, but they're in the country.
Mm-hmm. I saw an example of that. I mean, I guess not validated, but it was pretty apparent. There was an auto accident in front of my office a few years back. And when we said, okay, well, are you okay? And we'll call 911. They disappeared into the brush and we never saw them again. They just abandoned the car and took off. So obviously they did not want to be apprehended by any type of law enforcement or questioned in any way.
That's right. And whether just because they're here illegally or because not just illegally, but they are wanted criminals. We have so many people that have been deported, illegal aliens that have come to the U.S., committed a crime, been sentenced to prison, served their sentence, deported back to their country, and have made their way back into our country. And these are a lot of sex offenders, convicted felons of a lot of different types of crimes back in our communities. And so we already have a big problem with crime in our own country to begin with, right? We have this crime surge and disrespect for law enforcement. And all of a sudden, we have to. When I say we, I talk about the law enforcement community, because I talk to them all over the country. They have to now absorb these new crimes being committed from people from all over the world back in their communities. And they tell me, well, we're still the same number of police officers. We still have the same budget. None of that has changed. But what has changed is the number of people being forcibly absorbed into that community. And something's got to give. At one point, the healthcare system, obviously the criminal justice system, the school systems are affected. Everything is affected. The infrastructure is affected, and we're feeling it not just in the border anymore, but the entire country.
Yeah, those are the hidden costs that people don't realize, but they are very, very real. They think, oh, well, it's just about the monetary strain of what they are being given by the federal government, but it far exceeds that.
That's right.
So I know you've mentioned about the cartels needing to be designated as foreign terrorist organizations. What is the likelihood of that happening? I think let's think ahead to the future. I know what the likelihood of that happening is right now today, but let's look ahead to next year after we've gotten an election behind us. What is the likelihood of that happening then?
It's a big likelihood that it's going to happen. As a matter of fact, President Trump had already had that in his mind during his tenure, and he had that conversation with Mexico, and Mexico pushed back hard, basically begged him not to designate the cartels. Remember, he threatened them with doing that, and also with the tariffs. And Mexico all of a sudden, started doing their enforcement on the southern border. Mexico is a big partner here. Mexico, there's a lot of issues with Mexico right now. There's a lot of corruption. A new president was elected, a female president in Mexico just this past June, and she's a communist. And you heard that right. You didn't hear me stutter. She's a communist, and so this is a type of ideology that we're having to deal with right next door to us, not 6,000 miles away in the Middle East, but right next door to us. And why? Because the cartels are the ones that are running a parallel government in Mexico. And yes, we're way overdue from them being designated as FTOs, foreign terrorist organizations, because that's the type of thing that we need now to actually combat them. I'm the first one to tell you the way that I used to investigate them, and I would identify you, follow you, investigate you, and then it'll take me a year or 18 months to take down your drug dealing, cell. Those days are over, Mary. Those don't exist anymore. We need to come in and treat these individuals and organizations as what they are, and they're terrorists. They have terrorized not only the country of Mexico, but our own country in killing us with fentanyl, human trafficking, and all of this that they're heavily involved with. And so designating them changes the game to the advantage of the U.S. to take out their assets, take out all their illicit funds. They have the properties here. They have their money in the U.S. banking system. We have to go after that where it hurts them. But ultimately, then gives us the opportunity to include DOD resources and other resources that we don't have, and different approaches. By the way, the other people that we get to go after are everyone else that deals with the cartels. So if you're dealing and financing or any way have an association with, let's say, the Sinaloa cartel, who's now a foreign terrorist organization, just like ISIS, well, we get to go pick you up too, because you can't be mingling and interacting with a terrorist organization, just like if you would right now with ISIS. You're going to get a knock on your door. Well, the same thing would happen with all these all these gangs in the U.S. and all these individuals that are in contact with these organizations out of Mexico. We get to pick them up too, and I think you'll have a positive ripple effect of people not wanting to interact with the cartels because now they're terrorists, because they know they're going to come after them as well for being involved with them. And so I look forward to that happening under the next administration.
What about the possibility of deeming fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction?
Let me tell you, And so this is, I want people to understand that the fentanyl that is being used and put in these counterfeit pills, it's not the fentanyl that is actually used in medical
Right.
terms, because fentanyl is a real narcotic. It's a real scheduled drug. It's used for terminally ill patients and anesthesia. This
Mhm.
is synthetic. We're talking about the fentanyl which
Right.
makes it even more potent and more dangerous because it's killing hundreds of thousands of Americans. And to me, imagine if hundreds of thousands of Americans were killed by a bomb from China or with bullets from China. We would be uh, having a very different response to that.
Mhm.
But for some reason,
Absolutely.
because it's a pill and it's kind of like a silent killer, there's no reaction by this government, and that has to change. And that's one of the actual ways of putting it. This is a mass murder, mass destruction weapon that they're using against us and literally killing us. I was just in DC with the Lost Voices of
Hmm.
Fentanyl, where
Yes.
thousands of family members that were there had lost a loved one to a counterfeit pill. And let me tell you, besides it being sad, it outrages you because a lot of these deaths could have been prevented because these pills are flowing all over our country, and 7 out of 10 pills in this market, in this black market, are counterfeit according to the DEA.
There was an article that hit my news feed just a few days after that event in DC. It was about a 17-month-old baby that died from fentanyl poisoning. He was sitting on his grandfather's lap. Unfortunately, his grandfather was smoking fentanyl and he fell asleep. And apparently, the baby had enough residue in his hands. Hands went in his mouth, and he was gone when the grandfather woke up. Now, that is an outrage. And Derek Maltz posted something on X that they had taken down his report about something else on fentanyl. And how can they do that when this is such an epidemic killing people in America? And yet, not only is the government trying to cover it up, but some of our own social media is doing the
This is
same
not
thing.
even, this is the part that Derek and I and we don't understand how it became partisan, because let me tell you who it kills. It kills everybody. It doesn't kill Republicans. It doesn't know what party affiliation you have. It kills across the board. And so for the Democrats to make border security such a partisan issue, it's not. It's about saving lives.
I
And
know.
and so if you talk about human trafficking and children, how is that partisan? I think we all could agree that we all want to keep the children safe. We all don't want drugs to kill our own children. And so this is one of the biggest struggles, that this is the big problem that we have in the U.S., that for some reason people believe that whether you're conservative or liberal, it doesn't matter. Nobody, China doesn't care. The cartels don't care. They don't ask you what your party affiliation is before they give you the pill. They're going to kill you no matter what. And this is what we're trying to get across to the American people, is that this is the accomplishment that they have, because they love the fact that we're fighting amongst each other about it, that border security, for some reason, is a conservative issue, when really it's a
It's
public
not.
safety issue, and it's a national security issue, which affects every single American.
Yep. I've heard Derek say it, and I so agree with it. It's not red, it's not blue, it is red, white, and blue. It is all across America. And another thing that I have added to that a time or two is when you call 911, they do not ask you what is your party affiliation. They ask you for your address and what is your emergency. They don't care what your colors are.
That's right.
It's unbelievable. We have a lot of work to do, but we will get it done by the grace of God and with His help. And that's what it's going to take. And that's what people have got to come to terms with. We have got to realize that God is the answer for all of these problems. And that's, again, that's not a left or a right. That's just a truth, an
I think
absolute
so
given.
too. I think it's missing in our lives. The One of the things that I saw, and I mentioned it earlier, is a fatherless home. You know, I became a law enforcement officer at the age of 22, and all of a sudden I got ingrained into this criminal underworld that I never knew existed. But the pattern that I saw my entire career was two things. It was the use of illegal drugs and the fatherless home. that was almost always one or the other was present, or part of the equation as to why this cycle of non-education, crime, and all these other things. Because once you take the father out of the home, all the statistics, all the bad statistics go through the roof, right? And dropouts and work, and so you can't. It's very hard to then break the cycle of poverty and education and all the other issues surrounding that. Just that alone, but how is that? Well, the use of drugs, obviously, but then that's where God comes in, and to help us to keep our families together, to unite us, because the numbers speak for themselves. When you have a family, the nucleus family, that's what the left has done, is destroyed that nucleus family, so they could control that as well.
That's one of the goals of the globalists, is to destroy the nuclear family, because they know what's going to happen if they do. There is a direct and immediate result, and that's one of their reasons for pushing the destruction of the nuclear family, just like you said. It's crazy. I want to segue a little bit. We were talking a few minutes ago about the cartels. We all saw in the news that El Chapo's son had been arrested, along with the person who had been a partner to his father. What do you know about that you can share?
Well, I'll tell you, this is a big celebration. As a matter of fact, Derek and I were on the phone a lot, and a lot of my other colleagues, some that are still active and some that are retired, because it was a big fish that was taken down. I want people to understand, Ismael El Mayo Zambada is basically the head of the Sinaloa cartel. He's always been the head of the Sinaloa cartel. Chapo, the one that's in prison, they consider each other like brothers, even though they're not related by blood. They really consider each other's blood and brothers. And then the El Chapo's sons really see him as an uncle. And for him to be taken down, he'd been wanted for over 30 years. But this guy was in the shadows and nowhere can be found. So it was a very incredible work by U.S. law enforcement to be able to get him on U.S. soil. Now, there's a lot of stories out there as to how that happened, whether he was lured in, whether there was a ruse, whether he turned himself in. There's a lot of still questions up in the air. I know Mexico's trying to fight that, because Mexico is left out of the equation, and rightly so, I think, because Mexico immediately challenges the U.S. and says, well, our sovereignty was violated by the U.S. government by not informing us. My response to that is, our sovereignty is violated every day with the millions of people that you allow to come through your country into ours. By the way, all the people that are coming through Mexico are also illegal. People from Africa, China, Eastern European, Venezuela, they're all illegally present in Mexico. And Mexico has one of the most strongest immigration laws. I know because I work there, but they refuse to enforce it. And the corruption, it runs rampant there. So this big arrest it's good. It's good. Now there's already somebody that's replaced him, and nevertheless, it's shaken up the organization. But there's other criminal organizations, other cartels that they smell blood in the water, and now are going to try to take advantage and try to up them now, because the Sinaloa cartel is one of the most powerful cartels in the world, not just operating in the U.S. but in over 40 countries around the world. This is not. I want people to understand, these are not drug gangs. As a matter of fact, I don't call them drug cartels anymore. These are, we talked about, these are terrorist organizations. And I want people to think of them as Amazon. They're multi-billion-dollar industries with distribution centers all over the world. And so if Jeff Bezos would be arrested for whatever reason, something would happen at Amazon. You're not going to miss your package the next day. The drugs are still going to continue to come by the Sinaloa cartel, but there might be some layoffs, and so there might be some shakeup within the organization. The same thing with the Sinaloa cartel. There's going to be some shakeup. There's going to be some movement. There's, we've been talking about it. There's going to be a spike in violence on both sides of the border, and right now it's still been kind of calm. And I think they're trying to figure out what to do next. There might be a wave and then of violence on both sides of the border, by the way, because the Sinaloa cartel is heavily present in the U.S. We just kind of have to wait and see what the next move is going to be from these organizations.
One of the other things I had wanted to talk about today is your involvement with Border 911. Can you share with our listeners the message and the goal of Border 911 and then also your involvement with that organization?
Well, I'm a proud team member of Border 911 with Tom Holman, Derek Maltz that you mentioned, Sarah Carter, Rodney Scott. We have an incredible team, Jason Jones. We are basically wanting to bring our expertise and our knowledge of border security and everything surrounding it. Because sometimes people get stuck and they think that border security is just illegal immigration or it's just the drug cartels. Well, it's a lot more than that. It's a lot of foreign policy. There's a lot of domestic policy that is attached to that. And so we bring that experience. And what we're doing is trying to educate the American people as we go around the country, letting them know, first of all, briefing them on what is actually happening on the border. Step one, we'll tell you the truth of what's actually happening. We'll tell you why certain things are happening at the border. Why did the numbers dip in Mexico recently? We will tell you all of those issues, so you have a better understanding, because the mainstream media will not tell you. We kind of have become desensitized. If you look back, well, all of a sudden we have all these pictures of people coming in through the border, and people like, oh, another 10,000, oh, another million illegal people. Well, all of that has a ripple effect and has a real meaning behind those people coming in. And then, of course, the terrorism. So anyway, we bring all of this knowledge, and we're basically teaching, if you will, briefing and educating the American public so they can understand the issue at hand a little bit better and be able to make a better decision as to what they support and don't support.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I've done a couple of public speaking events outside of the state of Texas, and my message was plain and simple. It was the fact that these illegals do not come through Texas and stop. They keep going, and they are going all across America. And people were shocked to learn that. They thought this was a Texas problem or an Arizona problem. And I'm like, you need to understand this is a United States of America problem. This is not limited to just the border states. And it's probably right here in your backyard, and you don't even know it. And
that's absolutely true, Mary. That's absolutely true. I just got back from New York. Well, you've heard about New York, but it's not just New York. It's Denver. It's North Carolina. It's Kentucky. It's all these places. St. Louis, obviously California. You name the state, and they have now been affected by the open border system under this administration. And so when we go to these towns with Border 911 and we speak, all of a sudden you should see their face. We were in the south side of Chicago last month, and I really love this one because we had Black Americans, Hispanics, Muslims, everybody, and we went in there and we did the panel and we spoke and we took questions, and and this is Chicago, where they know, they're seeing what's happening to them, and yet really did not understand how this was, why this was happening in their communities. Well, we came in and really broke it down for them, and it gives them a lot of power. Knowledge is power, to be able to then go back to their communities, starting at the local level. I'm a big proponent of being involved in your local community and your local politics, because that's where I think you have the major impact. A lot of people think, the White House and the president. No. You right there in your own neighborhood can make a difference by being aware and being well informed. That's why, and therefore you can then now go forward and spread that word. And what we're telling you is nothing but the truth.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, that's what Awake to Truth is all about, is spreading the truth. And that's one of the reasons I was so thankful that you were willing to come on with us today.
Well, I really thank you for the opportunity to speak. We covered a lot of good subjects and great questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, I want to say thank you also for your service to America. Your ambush began the end of your career, and I'm sure that was very difficult for you. Thank you for your service to America. With that, we will close out our interview. And Victor, I would love to have you back on another day. So we'll think of some more topics and we'll do it again.
Anytime. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you. Thank you for watching the Awake to Truth podcast. Please follow me on X at Awake to Truth _. Also, subscribe to my Rumble channel at Awake to Truth Ministries. Our website is www.awaketotruth.org. I'm Mary Starr, your messenger of truth and resources, and may God richly bless you.